Item number 5 is discussion and possible action to approve city staff to solicit bids on the Harrison Avenue Bridge, stormwater, and roadway construction project. Staff comments. Leroy?
This drawing is in your packet. The blue is the base bid. Of course, this area is the bridge. And then this is the main inlet from Wentz coming south. And there will be another inlet here. So phase one, the base bid would include building a retaining wall to stabilize the stadium rock wall, which would be right in here. Stormwater improvements with 4 junction boxes. Of course, fill the cavity, and then only repair the paving disturbed by the project. Alternate 1 is in the red shaded area, and alternate 1 would add additional stormwater improvements east to a junction box by Bob Powell's building. And you can see the corner of Mr. Powell's building right here that would give them some relief from stormwater, with inlets on the north and south side of Harrison. And again, only repairing the portion of the street that is disturbed, so it would be patched. Alternate number 2 would be going additional stormwater improvements west to tie in where the future Division Street streetscape project would end, and then tie into that to bring it over to here. And that you would be adding 2 junction boxes and inlets on the north and south side of Harrison. And then again, just patching the area of the street where it is disturbed. So that's kind of how it's broken down into different phases. Alternate number 3 would be the full length of the project. And alternate number 3 is new pavement of the entire street rather than just patch it where it was disturbed by the work. Sidewalks, new sidewalks, period lighting from Mr. Powell's building back to the west to tie into the Division Street streetscape project, and it would match the streetscape in design and appearance. The cost of the various alternatives, if the base bid, the estimated cost is $917,645.68. Alternate number 1, which is the drainage improvements to the east to serve Mr. Powell's building, would be an additional $75,720. And at the bottom, you can see the cumulative as you go across. Alternate bid number 2 would be an additional $145,994, the estimate. And that would take it, of course, west to tie into the Division Street streetscape project. And then alternate number 3, resurfacing the whole street with new sidewalks and period lighting, would be an additional $598,000. So if you did all of the base bid and the 3 alternates, you'd be looking at roughly $1.7 million.
Only you'd get a finished surface when you're done,
Correct.
instead of a patch surface.
Correct. Now,
And lighting.
when You don't necessarily have to make the decision tonight as to what you're going to put out for bids, because we can put it all out for bids. And then once we get the bids in, then see what the actual bids are, then you can decide whether you're going to do the base bid, alternate 1, 2, or 3.
That's what I'd like to see.
Yes, we just didn't as staff not want to present it to you in the pieces as we were going to bid it out without you being aware. So if you're in agreement, after we get through tonight, what we do is put it all out for bids. Then when we open bids, we'd bring it back and look at what the actual true cost is to do it. The final part of the presentation on this is, if we are going to do the base bid and alternate 1 and 2, we would be ready to go out to bids on October 8th, open bids on the 29th, present to council the bids on the 5th of November, and actually start on the 19th, and then depending on whether it's just a base bid, alternate 1 and 2, would extend the construction period slightly. If we're going to bid it out and include alternate 3, it would delay the advertising bids from October 8th to November 8th, and we'd probably be looking at a June 30th. So if we want to bid out the base bid and all 3 alternates, we're probably looking at a November 8th advertising for bids.
Why is that? Because of the fee, the total?
Because the city manager just keeps adding to the project.
Well, could we look at an alternate number 4, where we have the intersection of Oklahoma and Wentz? I mean, it floods about the size of the Mineral Wells Lake. And I don't know, it doesn't look like, is there no entrance? Where does that water go? Because the Prairie Wolf Spirits landscape timbers always end up in the middle of the intersection when we get a heavy rain. And the rains also, I mean, flood the basements of those 2 buildings on the corner, the northeast corner, where the bicycle shop is, and then where the Mexican food restaurant is. The water gets up to those, I mean, it comes within a foot of my office door up onto the sidewalks when we get those heavy rains. So I don't know if we can do any additional, get the water the heck out of here from Oklahoma intersection to tie into this or not, but.
And I'll try to address that question. When the last 2 years, when we applied to AGCOG for a grant to do this project, we were going to do substantial stormwater drainage improvements. Right now, there's about a 4-foot tube that goes from Oklahoma down to Harrison to this point at Wentz. And from the temple back to Oklahoma is the stormwater basin that drains that way. And then if you go to the west, there's a break around Division that drains this way, and then on the other side of Division, it drains back towards, of course, the depot. This 4-foot tube, we've had cambered, and it is still open and serving, but that was put back in the 30s when the stadium was originally built. And that goes under the fire department. This tube goes under the football field and baseball field by the fire station and on down to, is it Snake Creek, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, correct.
When we were doing the larger project and applying for the grant, this tube no longer has enough capacity to serve the amount of stormwater that's in this drainage basin going all the way back east to the temple, because you have additional houses and parking and things, so the amount of stormwater has increased over time. We were going to lay another tube on top of this one and have two tubes come to this point. And that would have given more relief to Oklahoma. Now, we can do some improvements, but currently, this tube, drainage tube, surcharges. And there is under the bridge, a manhole. And of course, you normally don't play football when you're getting a 3 or 4 inch rain. The water has been coming up when it fills up and coming out the doors there by the rock wall onto the stadium. This situation will take this water and to this point, which is outside of the rock walls roughly right here, and there will be water get on the stadium, but it's not going to change the situation. It's getting on there now. If you try to address Oklahoma, yes, we can do that and look just like we're improving the drainage going east and west. We could look at doing some up to Oklahoma, but without having that second pipe installed, I'm not sure how much it would help because you're not increasing the capacity. You're just making more inlets for it to get in, but you're not adding capacity for it to go anywhere.
But
So
then
if we did
again,
that, we'd probably want to look at also putting that second tube on top of the first one to give us more capacity.
but what we're doing here is going to make it drain better on Cleveland, correct?
It will make it drain
Harrison.
better on Harrison from the vision when we tie into the streetscape project, and it will improve the drainage around Mr. Powell's building, but it still will have the same amount of capacity. If you put the second tube over top of the existing 4-inch or 4-foot tube, roughly, it's an oval shape, it's not 4 foot round, but roughly 4 foot, then you will have more capacity for it to get out quicker.
Well,
This will
well,
help, but the other tube would make it better.
What I was getting at is the creek only backs up because the river does. And the same thing's true here. Oklahoma only backs up because Harrison does.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So if we eliminate the backup at Harrison, is that not going to correct part of what's going on in Oklahoma to begin with?
It would provide some relief,
But not
but
enough.
my understanding is because the capacity of the existing 4-foot tube, it fills up and it can't get out of it fast enough to drain Oklahoma Harrison.
It's not that it's backed up at the end, it's just that it's not big enough to begin with.
Correct.
Okay.
So we had a one-time plan about another 4-foot tube.
Correct.
Can we implement that and go, and put it to bid
Yes,
along with the rest of the
What we
project?
could do is we could do an alternate 4, which would delay us some, of course, but we could look at, if you want to, add additional improvements to go up to the intersection of Wentz and Oklahoma and do some improvements there and put that in as an alternate as well.
If you have more input, in other words, if you put another tube in there, what is the impact down on, for instance, the football field? Is there any impact? It seems to me
Yes,
like
you
there's
would
going to
get
be more
you
water
would
coming
get-
through there.
You would get more water on, because you're allowing it to get here quicker, but it doesn't have any additional places to go when it gets here. So yes, you will have, for a short period of time, during a heavy rain event, you will have more water here on the stadium.
You'll have Oklahoma intersection on the stadium is what you're going to have.
Correct. For a short period of time,
Right.
till it
It all
gets a
goes
chance to
there
drain
anyway.
out.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes,
Just
it just
goes
doesn't
there
go as fast. Eventually, you would have to, and there's really no funding sources, you would have to take that second tube that you're going to take from the middle, the intersection of Oklahoma and Wentz, And down to here, you would have to add another drainage tube, and probably instead of laying on top of this one across the football field, you'd probably come out to the edge of the football field one way or the other and go down the side of the football field with that tube, and then tie in when you get past the baseball field.
I just know Thurman's Barber Shop currently floods pretty good when we get those rains, and they just spent a lot of money renovating that building, so it'd be nice if it didn't flood anymore. It's not even Thurman's anymore. Heck, it hadn't been Thurman's in 30 years, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
It's Thurman.
yeah.
Everybody thinks it's Thurman.
Yeah, everybody remembers Thurman.
And if you all would like, I will get with Bill, and Bill was going to be here tonight, but he had a family emergency that he had to take care of, so he couldn't be here tonight, but he was scheduled. What we can do is get the engineers to look at adding this additional drainage tube as a alternate to the project as well, and then go out for bids for, which would be the base bid and now 4 alternates for us to look at.
Does it not make sense to put it out to bid in pieces versus waiting for the whole?
I think if we put the whole project out for bids at one time, you're going to get a better price because you don't have to,
Piece it together? kind of?
well, and also mobilize. Because if you bid it at separate times, they may have a cost in there to mobilize for each one of them. And so, and then what you could do is pick which alternates you wanted to do now. And say, for example, there may be some things that we can do, like if we don't want to do this project right now, is do it in such a way that we could put this up to here and then come back and tie into this.
At a later date.
Is something we might look at doing. Just like we've come over here, so we can tie this one in, we could take something like this and go up here and then tie that tube in at a later date if we don't have the funding to do it now. But we wouldn't have to dig up this whole street if we resurfaced the entire street. And we'd be glad to go back and review that. We just realized that now that we're using 100% of local money rather than getting grant money to pay for a significant portion of it, we were just trying to be as cognizant of our limited funding as we could be.
Well, it looks to me like we'll be far enough out to apply for another grant. From what I'm hearing.
And we could always do that. I mean, in January, there is the next round, and you would know by the spring
There you go.
if you were awarded the grant or not. We just felt that the general public had kind of gotten tired of seeing the barrels and stuff, and a lot of people didn't understand.
His name
that.
is Bothroyd. Bothroyd, he's the one.
And a lot of people didn't understand, and I think we talked about it at meetings, we had it on Facebook, that what we were trying to do is apply for a grant that would provide 90% of the cost of the construction. Doesn't pay for 90% of engineering, but it paid for 90% of the construction cost. And if that's palatable to the city council, then we could come in and do those things and reapply for the grant. What happened to us on the grant, the first year we applied, AGCOG had a formula that, a scoring rating system that you got readiness points. And readiness points are you already had all the engineering work done and the design done, so you were ready to go out to bids. And you got points for that because the project happened faster. Well, you've got cities like Oklahoma City, that's an AGOG area, Norman, Edmond. Well, they have resources that they can do a lot of engineering on projects and then put them on the shelf and have them in the pipeline. And so they had an advantage over towns like Guthrie and Crescent and other towns that don't have the resources to do that. But after we received the points for the first round that we applied for, we noticed that if we'd had the readiness points, we would have got funded. So we came back to city council and we bit the bullet and we had the engineering design work done for the full project, and we applied, and lo and behold, they changed the ratings, scoring format. And I think they did it with good intentions because they were trying to level the playing field instead of being favorable to other, just the larger communities. But what they did, like you do on a lot of things, you do things and there's unintended consequences. The way they changed the scoring was more favorable to bicycle and walking paths than it was replacing bridges that need to be replaced in streets. And so this last round, Oklahoma City got $12 million for bicycle paths. And I think Edmond got about $3 million for a street project, and nobody else got anything. They are reviewing that scoring deal, and there will be a new scoring system that I think will ensure that small towns like Guthrie get part of the funding this next time around. But we just didn't know how patient our residents were to wait another year to see if, with the new scoring formula, if we could get this funded.
Can you go back one to your timeline of putting these to bid? Or two or three, wherever it is?
There it is.
Right there. So we're already to 2020.
Yes.
With the existing whole plan.
The applications would be submitted in January, and around March, April, we would know whether we would get awarded the grant.
Well, no, what I'm saying is for the whole project as a whole right now.
Yes.
If we were to put it out in the first three phases, we're already in 2020.
Correct.
Okay, so how further in 2020 are we going to be if we add Oklahoma? Is all I'm saying, the extra pipe.
It would-
13 months.
3 years. Channel,
Probably,
it's channel's deal.
it would probably add a couple weeks to get the.
So it's worth it, it's worth doing then, because we need to go after the grant. We don't want to have to shoulder $1 million or $1.7 million if we don't have to.
We have
Was
to
that-
bid it
was that the
anyway,
answer
don't
to
we?
the- I thought there
Correct.
might have been two questions there.
No, the answer was that it was
Now-
going to push it a couple weeks, but then that puts us in line to submit for the grant, right?
Yes, and remember, if we submit for the grant, we will need to do some things like resurfacing it where it matches our streetscape project, and do some other things that tie in, like some bump outs and some other things to get points.
I guess what I'm saying to the general public that's watching is that by adding Oklahoma and going for the grants is going to only cost us a couple, 3-4 weeks on top of where we're at today,
Right.
is what I'm hearing here.
And possibly.
And possibly not have to put out any of our money on it. And so it makes sense to go for the grant. If we're talking a year or 13 months, like James said, yeah, you wouldn't want to do it.
You would know around March of next year whether you got the grant funded or not.
There you go.
And so that's how long you'd have to wait. If we're not funded, we would be in a position to immediately put this out for bids.
And then, but when would we start construction? Not until March or April, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd probably be April or June.
Let's put it off 6 months.
Well, if we get the grant, how long before we're ready to break ground? We don't have to wait another
We-
6 months, do we?
No, we would be ready to go out for bids about the same time.
Exactly. So it's, we're waiting a few weeks and for a potential for it to be 100% funded, or a big portion of it.
90%.
90,
Yeah.
Meaning that
Well, I
a
mean,
big
the-
chunk of
The
it.
start date wouldn't be December 9th anymore, would it?
No.
No,
No.
it's always,
So
the
it's
start
gonna
date's
be-
never,
So everything.
The start date would
gonna
be,
be
Top
April.
section.
the start date would be next summertime, sometime.
right, but that's pretty much where it's going to be anyway, for the most part. A little bit before then.
If you waited and applied for the grant, and this time we were successful on the grant, you would not only address the bridge and get grant funds for that, it would allow you to make substantial drainage improvements that would help the situation at both Oklahoma and Wentz and Harrison and Wentz.
And that whole area is kind of growing up a little bit, and I think it needs it personally, just me. Unless Steve wants to write a check, then we can go ahead and just fund it now.
Well, I think the thing is, and I get lots of questions, as all of you have, as to why it's been taking so long
Yeah.
to do something. And we have put out information saying that we have an opportunity here, folks, of having 90% of this funded by a grant.
Yeah.
I think it's gotta
And
be.
and we thought for sure after the first submission, as Leroy has said, that we would be successful, and then things change. Things can change again. And I think, Brian, your point is, even if they do change, we've not lost a whole lot of time.
No, and then plus we have to
and-
have the drawings.
And we got to have this done anyway. We've got to have this done anyway. So it doesn't really change anything that we're doing today necessarily, other than adding, I guess, the fourth option. But it does delay saying, okay, we're going to wait till this next grant opportunity
Cycle.
goes through ACOG until we decide one way or the other. That's where we,
And-
Yeah,
and
but-
we-
that's where we fish or cut bait.
And if that's the way we decide to go, we'll make the engineers aware tomorrow to get everything prepared to submit the grant application. And then when we submit the grant application, we'll come back and do another report to show what we're going to do to serve Oklahoma and all that as part of that project.
Wouldn't it be possible, since we're dealing with a disaster of multiple intersections, that might help us get the grant? Potentially?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, if we're going to get the grant, we need to tie into Oklahoma because it's the one that generates the opportunity for the grant.
Let's do it.
Okay. Back to what's in front of us, which is a motion to authorize the staff to go out and solicit bids.
That has
I
to
will
be,
entertain,
doesn't that have to be tabled
Table it.
until we,
Well, I think what would be good is a motion to delay bidding and reapply for the STBG grant.
So moved.
Second.
okay, any other discussion?
nope, we've got a smiley face, though.
I got one too.
Mayor, you and I can go sit down there again and have them tell us yes or no.
Okay, well, I mean, it's very, very
Well, maybe another
competitive
couple have to
at
go
any
down
time.
so they get a yes.
I think it's very much to save well over $1 million to the city, well over,
Yeah.
probably close to $1.5 million. I think it's worth a few months to see, give it another shot and make it happen.
So long as we
Agreed.
buy something this summer, whether the government buys it, we buys it, whoever.
It's gotta happen.
We got to get
Yeah,
something
We've
done. I
messed
mean,
around with this long enough.
Powell's building floods,
Thinking about it.
Thurman's floods, everything's flooding down there, so we got to move forward on something.
Why it's failed
And
so far.
I don't think we've been messing around. I think we've been trying to figure out,
Well, it ain't messing around, but it's
excuse me,
messing around.
excuse me. I think we've been trying to figure out best way to use the resources that we're responsible for. And I think
violently
I
in
think what we're doing.
agreement.
We have a motion and a second to,
No, we already have it, we've all voted on it.
We've all voted.
Now we've all voted.
All those grants.
Let's see the votes. Okay, unanimous approval to prepare for the next grant cycle through ACOG with all of the options, including option 4 and connection to Oklahoma and division. Does that
Your neighbor.
cover?
Yes.
I need to memorize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she used to be your neighbor.